My name is Martin. I'm 62 years old. And for most of my life, I thought being a good father meant giving everything and asking for nothing in return. My son, David, was my pride and joy. When his business ideas failed, I stepped in with money. When his marriage started falling apart, I paid for counseling. I even bought him his first apartment, thinking it would give him the stability he needed to finally stand on his own. But here's the thing. The more I gave, the more invisible I became. He stopped seeing me as a person and started treating me like a walking wallet. Still, I convinced myself this was love. After all, what else was I living for? Last Christmas changed everything. I called David, excited to bring over a special dinner I had prepared, my late wife's recipe, one he used to love as a child. But instead of joy, I got silence. Then, finally, a short, cutting text. Dad, don't come. You bring too much drama. We just want peace this year. I read those words over and over, my hands shaking. Drama? Me? The man who had spent decades cleaning up his messes? It felt like being erased from my own family. But instead of collapsing under the weight of rejection, something inside me clicked. For the first time, I realized my life didn't have to revolve around a son who no longer wanted me in it. That night, I made a quiet decision. If my presence was unwanted, then I would disappear, not as a broken man, but on my own terms. That was the beginning of everything. The morning after that Christmas rejection, I woke up earlier than usual. Normally, holidays felt heavy, quiet walls, an empty house, and memories of my late wife echoing everywhere. But this time I felt strangely calm, as if the pain had burned away something inside me and left behind only clarity. I brewed my coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the photo of David as a little boy, smiling with ice cream on his face, holding my hand. That boy was gone. In his place stood a man who no longer wanted me around. And if I kept living only for him, I would waste what little time I had left. So I opened my laptop and pulled up the documents I had been secretly preparing for months. See, I had built my company from scratch. It was worth millions now. And though I had always imagined leaving it for David, I had already started wondering, what if my legacy didn't have to end with him? By noon, I was on the phone with my lawyer. It's time, I said simply. Within days, the process to sell my company was in motion. I also called a foundation I had long admired, arranging a meeting about donations. Strangely, instead of grief, I felt lighter with every step, as though I was finally reclaiming a part of myself I had buried for years. David didn't know. He thought he had pushed me away like before, and that I would eventually come crawling back, apologizing just to keep the peace. But this time, I wasn't crawling. I was walking away, and I wasn't planning to turn back. A week later, the company sale was finalized. Just like that, 3 decades of sweat, sleepless nights, and endless sacrifices were gone with a signature. When I walked out of the lawyer's office, briefcase in hand, the winter air felt sharper, cleaner. I wasn't Mr. Martin Carter, CEO, anymore. I was just Martin. That night, I invited David to dinner. I wanted one last chance to face him before disappearing into my new life. He arrived late, barely glancing up from his phone as he sat across from me. Dad, if this is about Christmas, I already told you Sarah and I need space. You interfere too much, he said casually, like he was discussing the weather. I smiled. Not the bitter smile he expected, but a calm one. It's not about Christmas, David. I just wanted to tell you that I sold the company. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. You... what? I sold it. Everything's finalized. And I've donated a large portion of the proceeds to charity. His face drained of color. Are you insane? That company was supposed to be mine. You've worked your whole life for it, for us." I leaned back, watching him struggle. For years, I had lived only to provide for him, to be the safety net, the endless wallet, the invisible servant. And yet, here he was, furious not because he lost me, but because he lost what I could give him. "I didn't work my whole life for you, David," I said softly. "I worked for me, and now I'm finally free." For the first time, I saw my son not as family, but as a stranger. 2 days later, I stood in the middle of my empty house. The walls echoed with silence. The paintings were gone, the furniture sold, the shelves bare. 30 years of family life, reduced to dust and receipts. In the corner sat a single suitcase, everything I was taking with me. Shirts, a passport, a thick envelope with travel papers, and a one-way ticket to Lisbon. The rest didn't matter anymore. Before leaving, I walked slowly through each room, almost like a goodbye ritual. The kitchen where I used to cook Sunday breakfasts that David barely touched. The study filled with books I loved, but no one else cared about. The living room, once full of laughter, now a hollow shell. When I closed the front door behind me, I didn't feel sadness. I felt weight lift off my shoulders. But not everyone was calm. The next morning, my phone buzzed. David. He had finally realized something was wrong. The first call, I ignored. The second, too. By the fifth call in an hour, I switched the phone off. Hours later, my email exploded with desperate messages. "Dad, where are you? We need to talk. You can't just disappear like this. This is insane. What about the family business? What about me?" It was almost amusing. For years, I had been begging for his attention, his time, his presence. Now, the roles were reversed. As I slipped my phone into the suitcase, I whispered to myself, "Let him wonder. Let him feel silence for once." That silence was my revenge. And it was only the beginning. By the time my plane landed in Lisbon, David had called me 31 times. When I finally switched my phone back on at the airport, the screen lit up like fireworks. Missed calls, dozens of messages, even frantic voicemails. One of them still rings in my ears. "Dad, what the hell are you doing? You can't just vanish like this. Do you know how this makes me look? Call me back now." It wasn't worry. It wasn't love. It was fear that without me, his golden world might crack. As I wheeled my suitcase out into the fresh Portuguese air, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in decades, I wasn't rushing to fix things for anyone else. I wasn't the provider, the problem solver, the invisible safety net. I was just a man with a second chance. Meanwhile, back home, chaos was spreading. A friend later told me that David had shown up at my old office, storming into the lawyer's wing like he owned the place. He demanded answers, screaming, "Where's my father? He wouldn't do this without telling me. He owes me." But the truth was simple. I didn't owe him anything anymore. From a quiet cafe in Lisbon, sipping strong coffee, I watched as the missed calls kept piling up. 45. 52. 58. I didn't answer a single one, because this time the silence wasn't empty. It was freedom. And deep down, I knew the longer he begged, the more he'd realize the one thing money, power, and entitlement couldn't buy back. Me. By the end of the week, my son's desperation turned into fury. The messages shifted from pleading to threats. "If you don't call me back, I'll have my lawyer freeze everything. You can't just disappear. You'll regret this." Regret? I'd lived my entire life regretting how much of myself I had given away. That era was over. 2 days later, my ex-wife David's mother called me. It was the first time we'd spoken in years. Her voice was sharp, rehearsed, like a lawyer reading from a script. "Martin, Whatever you're doing, stop. David is distraught. You're humiliating him. Just come home, talk it out, and we can fix this. Fix this? There was nothing left to fix. What they didn't know was that before I left, I had already tied up every loose end. My company shares were sold, my accounts secured, my will rewritten. Nothing David or his lawyer could touch. I had walked away clean. I sat in my small Lisbon apartment looking out at the orange rooftops glowing under the evening sun and realized, for the first time, I was untouchable. David's lawyer sent me an official letter demanding I explain myself, threatening legal consequences. I folded it neatly, set it aside, and poured myself another glass of wine. Their empire had been built on the assumption that I would always stay, always sacrifice, always provide. But the foundation was gone now, and for the first time, the cracks were showing. A week later, I got the notification. David had booked a flight to Lisbon. He wasn't just calling now. He was coming for me. For days, his messages became frantic, almost unhinged. I'm not letting you just run away from this. You owe me answers. If I have to, I'll drag you back myself. I could almost see him pacing his apartment, clenching his fists, his perfect image starting to crack. The truth was, I wasn't hiding. My address wasn't a secret. I had sent postcards to a few old friends, even posted photos of Lisbon's streets online. But David didn't know me well enough anymore to understand. I didn't care if he found me. When his plane landed, I didn't feel fear. I felt calm. For 60 years, he had been the center of my decisions, my sacrifices, my life. Now, he was just another visitor. I spotted him at the cafe across from my building, angry, impatient, scanning every face. The same entitled posture I'd seen since he was a teenager. But this time, he looked smaller. He didn't notice me watching from the balcony above. A strange peace washed over me. He had crossed an ocean to confront me, but the truth was, there was nothing left for him to take. The provider he depended on was gone. All he had left was a father who no longer belonged to him. The next morning, I didn't avoid him. I walked straight into the cafe where David sat, his phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp and impatient. When his eyes landed on me, his jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked like the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders, helpless, searching. But then the anger returned. "Dad," he spat, standing so quickly the chair scraped the floor. "What the hell is this? Selling everything? Disappearing like some lunatic? Do you know how insane you look? Do you know how much you've humiliated me? Humiliated him? Not worried about me. Not hurt. Not even curious why. Just humiliated." I sat down calmly, folding my hands. "David, for 60 years, I lived for other people. Your mother, you, everyone but myself. Now, for the first time, I'm living for me." His face reddened. "You abandoned us. After everything you gave, you just threw it away. What about the company, the money, the house? Do you have any idea how much you ruined?" I smiled, soft but unshakable. "I didn't ruin anything, son. I freed myself. The company is gone, the money is gone, and you'll survive without them. What I refused to do was survive without myself." For the first time, he was speechless. His mouth opened, then closed. His hands trembled, as if searching for words that no longer existed. And in that silence, I realized the chains had finally broken. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating. For the first time in years, David had no script, no lecture, no demand. Just silence. Then, suddenly, he leaned forward, his voice trembling, not with anger this time, but with something closer to fear. "Dad, don't do this. Don't leave me behind. You can't just erase everything we built. You can't erase me. Erase him. That word struck me. For decades, I had been the one erased my needs, my voice, my happiness. And now, for the first time, he felt it. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a photo. A faded picture of us from years ago. Me holding his tiny hand at the park. His eyes glistened. You're all I had. I know I was selfish. I know I took too much. But if you walk away, I'll have nothing. For a moment, my chest tightened. The father in me wanted to reach across, to comfort him. But then I remembered every Christmas I spent alone, every phone call ignored, every moment I was treated as a wallet instead of a man. I placed my hand gently on the photo, then slid it back toward him. David, I will always love you, but I will not lose myself to keep you comfortable. If you truly want me in your life, you'll have to see me for who I am, not what I provide. He swallowed hard, tears threatening to spill, but pride wouldn't let him break in front of me. Instead, he stood, shaking, his voice raw. You'll regret this. You'll regret leaving me. But deep inside, I knew. For once, I wouldn't. The plane touched down in Lisbon, just as the sun painted the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. I stepped off with nothing but a suitcase, a passport, and the kind of freedom I hadn't felt in decades. No titles, no obligations, no expectations, just me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't provider, ATM, or problem solver. I was Martin, a man who had chosen himself. In the weeks that followed, I rented a small apartment by the ocean. I learned to cook for myself, walked cobblestone streets, and even picked up Portuguese from the cafe owner downstairs. At night, I sat by the waves, listening not to demands or complaints, but to silence. Sweet, liberating silence. Meanwhile, the calls came in waves. 58 missed calls in 2 days. David, desperate, angry, pleading. At first, I ignored them. Then, one evening, I answered. His voice cracked through the phone. Dad, I don't know who I am without you. I closed my eyes, my heart heavy but resolute. Then maybe it's time you find out. There was no anger in my words, just truth. For him. For me. I hung up, and for the first time in years, I smiled without guilt. The man staring back at me in the reflection of the cafe window wasn't broken, wasn't used, wasn't erased. He was reborn. And as the waves crashed against the shore, I whispered to myself, I didn't lose everything. I finally found myself.